guys, we've got Coach Payton and George Paton ready for the call. Megan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. We'll begin with Parker Gabriel of the Denver Post.
Hey guys, Parker Gabriel from the Denver Post here. For each of you, but I guess maybe Sean particularly, you talk a lot about over the last year about painting the right picture around Bo. As you evaluate, especially I guess offensive players, skill players in this draft class, how much is Bo and what he does or his skill set on your mind, and how much is it just about, finding players that you think can help your team in general?
I think when we talk about like painting picture for Bo, it's like painting the picture for quarterback. So listen, we love that we're not in that same position a year ago with the selection of Bo, but I don't think in those meetings, we might call Bo in and ask about an Oregon player, but I think the simple answer to your question is, what's the vision for players we might add on offense or we might add on defense? When you help your defense, you help your quarterback as well. There's a lot of runners in this draft. Certainly it's an opportunity, but they're different type runners. Some of them are physical downhill runners. Some of them are guys that can take, a misdirection, scissors type run and go the other direction with it. And so it just depends on what you're looking for. But we love Bo, but we're not talking about Bo in these meetings a lot. I mean, I just say that, I think it's really more of how do they add to what we do offensively.
Andrew Mason, the Fan.
Hey, for both George and Sean, for both of you guys, when you're looking at players, especially guys that fit into the kind of the day 2, day 3 mold, what are you balancing in terms of players who maybe are more ready to help immediately versus ones where the vision is, okay, these guys are more longer runway players who maybe aren't going to do as much in year 1, but have a higher ceiling year 2, year 3 in terms of the vision for them?
Yeah, I mean, we just had a conversation about this. We were talking about some interior D linemen, and there's one that's ready to roll. We think he's ready to play next year, and then there's another one that, man, you may hit on him. And I think it's important that you go around the room, you talk to the assistant coaches, you talk to the scouts, and what's the vision for this player, year 1, year 2, and beyond. And so you have a lot of those discussions, and then you dig into the mental, and the makeup of these players, and do they have the makeup if they are raw to take that next step, the work ethic to take that next step. And so you dig into all these, you get into the analytics, and they help you break a tie, a cluster. And so that's kind of how we go about it.
Zach Stevens, DNVR.
Zach Stevens, DNVR. This can be for either of you. I want to know the inner workings of how trades, specifically in the first round, come about. Are those conversations where you're already talking to other teams now and you have trades in place if a player is there? Or is it really just frantic? It all comes together during the first round?
I would say both, really. I mean, we've made calls, this week you make a lot of calls. And then, next week, the more serious calls, hey, if this player's here, we want to move up or what have you. So, I've talked to most every GM in the NFL, kind of set the table, set the plan. Hey, if your player's here, when you move up, what's the range? And so you start talking parameters. I would say it gets more serious next week, and then really draft day. Sometimes maybe you haven't heard from a team, and someone's just, they really want to come up and they're aggressive. Their players there, and so I would say, this week, next, and then draft day, all 3.
I think the other thing, meaning when you talk to people this time of the process, everyone's great. But I asked George this question the other day. Let's look up there and discuss these GMs and head coaches. And there are some teams that are more risk averse, maybe, or maybe a little bit more conventional. That would be harder to vision a significant trade, maybe just historically, and others that are much more that kind of factors into it, at least. And oftentimes, there's always a new group in our league, right? There's a handful of new GM, new head coaches. And so, how do you look at them? And so there's certain ones where right away that, hey, you can do business without either having to feel like they're getting a win. And I think that's important.
Just to follow up, like last year, you always want an exit plan. If your players isn't there or players aren't there, and we had probably every time we took a player in the draft, we had an exit plan if our player wasn't there. And so, those talks, a week before, the week of, obviously they help, draft day because you've had those communications.
Eric Dalala, DenverBroncos.com.
Yeah, for both of you guys, but George, maybe starting with you, as you and Coach go into your third draft together, having that consistency, what sort of value does that provide both in the scouting process and then during the draft, kind of that rhythm that you're able to establish, and maybe just how that works through those 3 days?
No, it's valuable. It's going into our third draft. We've had 3 years of free agency, 2 seasons and everything in between. And so, we're aligned in how we want to build this team. And we both have a clear vision, what type of players, what type of people we want to bring into that building. The collaboration in the building, all the departments, with the ownership, Sean, myself, the scouts, the coaches, Bo and his team, Tony and the analytics group, it's been outstanding. So, you just look back to our first draft, I feel so much more settled. I feel like this is the most prepared, I'll be for a draft. And, in large part because of continuity we've had.
After, you have the early draft meeting, then you have your final stack, if you will. I think one of the things, and I think I can speak for George, but both of us enjoy, like we sit in that room, that atrium, we're right next to each other. I drank out of his water bottle accidentally the other day, and we're like right next to each other, watching film, and you break for lunch, you break for dinner, and it's the whole, you kind of go through the rounds, and others will come back in with, maybe we hand 2 scouts and 2 coaches a clump of outside linebackers or a clump of nose tackles, and they'll come back. And I think the most enjoyable part of it for me is, man, these, like, it's stacked, but we're beginning to start, and we're over here, the board is, but we're kind of in this like 4th, 5th round now, wiggling through, and you're always 2 things you're looking for. Somehow or another, maybe are we undervaluing a player, and because you're dying to fall in love with guys, like that's a good thing, and then you're also just as anxious to look at and say, hey, the vision, is it going to be easy to make our roster? And so these 2 weeks or week and a half prior, the whole process, we sit, but it's fantastic. It's something that we enjoy doing, and it's thorough.
Troy Rank, Denver Post.
Troy Rank, Denver Post, for both Coach Payton and George. You guys have closed the gap in the AFC, and particularly the AFC West, with really good drafts, good off seasons. Sean, maybe it's more specific to you in a golf analogy. At what point do you not want to just chip your way to your green and break out the driver when you see yourself getting closer? Do you have to resist that temptation, or is it closer now that, man, we are 1 or 2 players away and we're right there?
Yeah, we're on the tee box. I respect, and I like the question, and we can't be afraid of talking about our goals and where we see this team, and especially coming out of free agency, and I probably, more than any other average to below average handicap golfer, am guilty of hitting a driver when I should be hitting another club.
Mike Kliss, 9 News.
Yep, Mike Kliss, 9 News. Yeah, guys, you've had you in this pre-draft process, you met with guys at the combine. You brought guys in for visits here at Broncos headquarters. Agents have said that you have Zooms. How do you determine that? How do you determine which guys to bring in and what type of prospects?
There's all different reasons, Mike, why we bring someone in on a top 30 or why we would, we talk to every player, at all the all-star games, the combine. And then, we get through our meetings and maybe there's a player we just need a little more information on. Maybe can he learn what we're doing mentally? Maybe he has something off the field we want to address. Maybe it's someone who didn't go to the combine. We want to bring him in and get a physical so we can draft the player. Maybe we're just trying to recruit a college free agent. So there's a number of reasons why we're bringing players in, why we're talking with players. You can't have enough information. And so we're always searching for information and especially the coaches, those Zooms are really, they're so important. And so, just the more information we can get, the better decisions we're going to make.
Jeff Legwold, ESPN.
Hey guys, I just have a general question for both of you about the first round. Just in making the laps around the league leading up to this, there seems to be a feeling it's a little light in the first round this year in terms of grades. And I wondered what each of you thought of that belief and how does that impact how you approach, how you do things in the first round, particularly as your pick comes up.
Yeah, look, I think we would agree with that. And look, in normal years, there's usually X amount of this, X amount of that, when you look in the first 15 picks. And I think that maybe it's a little bit more highlighted by that early 17 picks, but it's just depending on the team. And so, look, it's good to be picking 20 then, if that's the case, because I think, we've all heard and read, I don't, depending on where you're at and what you need, there is a point where we feel like, we can get a similar player at this portion of the first round that you might be able to get maybe 7 picks up, and you might be able to get 7 picks into the second. And I think our board would reflect a little bit of what you just asked.
And I just think, last year and other years, last year we had 6 quarterbacks in the first round, so that pushed a number of good players, down to the 15s and 20s that typically wouldn't be there. This year, there's maybe 2 or 3 quarterbacks, and maybe 1 in the top 10, maybe, who knows. But we think, there's going to be a similar player at 10 that probably there's going to be a 20, just in our grades. We have more players in that area than we do 1 through 10. And so, you just kind of, you work your board, you set your strategy based on that. We do think there's some strength in the, maybe the middle round, maybe second, third, and fourth.
Chris Thomas, Gazette.
Yeah, Chris Thomas in Denver Gazette. Question for Sean Payton, and if George wants to jump in as well. How much of a premium are you guys putting in this draft on getting more weapons on offense for Bo Nix, more guys with explosive play potential?
Yeah, I've answered this before and referenced it, and I mean this. There's 2 great allies that I think for quarterback play, to help quarterback play. It's real good defense and obviously a real good running game. And so I appreciate that term weapons. And yet I think, look, there'll be focus on the running back position. It's a pretty good draft for running backs. It's a pretty good draft for interior defensive linemen. But when we sign a good football player, in free agency, Dre Greenlaw, we feel like we've helped our team and in turn our defense, and then in turn the quarterback position. Because how do we get them off the high dive? You don't want to be 3rd and long. You don't want to be behind in games. Those are all things that make that position more challenging. And so I think one of the challenges, this is going to lead me, one of the challenges for the rookie quarterbacks that are getting taken really early in drafts is they're generally getting taken to teams that haven't had success. And so, and the patience for when they play is not as long. And so now they're playing on maybe teams that aren't as good. And every once in a while you have like what Washington did, which is fantastic. But yeah, I think we're focused on key positions. Look, and there's some positions, guys, that will be tougher to make on our team than other positions. And yet, man, one of the things that we did a good job of in free agency is put ourselves in a position to really look at, again, 3 years out, how do we like this player? And unfortunately, there's some deep positions in this draft that I think can help not only us, but a number of teams.
Jake Cosmatter, The Athletic.
Hey, George, as you guys seek to kind of add the trait of pass blocking from the running back position, obviously you had mentioned Javonte, that was a strength of his. How difficult is that to project at that position when you're just kind of looking at different traits of a running back, that trait in particular, as you evaluate a
Yeah,
guy?
maybe Sean can add, but you don't see a lot of college runners protecting at a high level. And so that's, you have to dig into the player, the person, the build, the body type, his running style. Can you project to be a good pass protector? Is he mentally strong enough to be a good pass protector? So we look into those things. Obviously, we're looking at the runner, the pass receiving skills. Is he a 3-down back, change of pace like Sean talked about? Does he have the traits to develop in a pass protector? So that's what we dig into, our coaches dig into. And again, a lot of it is the mental part of it. And do they have the build to withstand the pass protector?
And to their defense, oftentimes, a lot of the protection schemes we see varied. And so I think that there definitely is a next step for all of them. And a lot of them are ready for it. But to the extent that it exists in our league relative to the 3rd-down packages and the mixed protect, I think that is a quick learning curve for them all. Does the stature match? Does the intelligence match? But we discuss it. Obviously, it's important.
Brandon Cristal, Gorilla Sports.
Hey, this question, I guess, is for both you guys. I saw Max Crosby and Adam Schefter talking about Max giving prospect ideas to previous GMs there and how he really gets into the draft. So I know, Sean, you've talked about asking players for advice about teammates like Forsythe and his thoughts on Bo or whatever. But have you had players, cornerstone kind of players, guys that aren't worried about losing their job, like a PS2 type, that you asked to either evaluate the position they play or the position they go against primarily? So like wideouts for corners or whatever it may be. Have you ever relied on players, or would you if they showed interest?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if they've been teammates with a player, if they played against a player, I've asked Pat, not this draft, but other drafts, about Alabama guys, or maybe you faced this receiver and what were his thoughts. And we'll be sitting in meetings and we'll be watching an Oregon player, and Sean will call Bo, right then and there. And we've done that with other players. Obviously, if they've been in a locker room with them, they know the player. It's just institutional knowledge. We do it with coaches. We have a lot of coaches here, been a lot of different places. We've got coaches in college, so they obviously can help with a little background on the player. So any information we can gather, we do.
I would say 90% of the players we read, this is a small league, and 90% of the players we read, all right, they've been to 2 schools. Hey, find out if such and such knew this player. Like, we've got some new coaches on our staff. There's scouts. There's nutritionists that we have that were here and there. And I'd say, put a player up in the draft board right now, pick one out, and there'll be some tie to maybe a little bit more intimate tie to a person in our building. And certainly we take advantage of that.
Luca Evans, Denver Post.
Hey guys, great to meet you. both. Just wanted to ask, there's a lot of thinking in the NFL around, whether you should or shouldn't take a back in the first round. It's a line of thought that's persisted for a while. Sean, I know you've done it twice, I think. George, I don't think you've ever done it. Obviously, that's situational, but what are your both kind of general philosophies on, should you swing on a back in the first round of the draft, and in particular, a class as deep as this one?
I've done it twice.
Ingram and who else?
I think Ingram.
Ingram and yeah, Reggie.
Ah, there you go. Second pick overall.
Yeah, I mean, he fell to you, but
No, that you're right. That would be like a Parcells question, and look, I think it's all about your vision and your vision for the player. I think there is this feeling oftentimes that there are certain positions that may be more available every offseason than others. And yet you've got to look at the ability and look at, I remember the selection of Reggie and how that evolved very clearly. And Ingram, our plan was to take Mark at 22, and then Cam Jordan fell to us. We kind of still didn't want to lose track of the Ingram thing, and then we traded back in. So I think if you have a real clear vision for how you want to use them, I think it's just the team's feeling for how good that player is and what type of career we think we can have. And then sometimes it's just, the way the draft unfolds, sometimes you don't take one. It's not because you don't want to take one. It's just that maybe another position, landed in your lap. So a lot of it is your team and then the player specifically.
We haven't drafted one where I've been. I mean, I benefited from Adrian Peterson. I got there right after they drafted him. And he impacted that organization for a long time. And if you can find a guy like that, you take him right away. And if he's the best player on your board, he can impact your team. I think you take him regardless of the position.
George took a first round back in the early second that everyone in the league, I mean, that was a good pick.
Dalvin.
Yeah,
Dalvin Cook.
that was a first round back. He just got him a little later.
Got him a little later.
Cody Rourke, Mile High Sports.
Yeah, Cody Rourke, Mile High Sports. Sean, before the Super Bowl, you mentioned that you guys are higher on your wide receiver room than most would believe. Is there anything in that room with who you have now that you'd like to see something progress forward here this year, or is something that you can find in the draft this year?
Yeah, I mean, look, we drafted 2 receivers last year, and the good news is after their first year, we really like their progress, and we certainly see. Just take Marvin for a second from year 1 to year 2. We saw the returnability, and we saw certainly glimpses in his rookie year. More production, obviously, in his second year. Troy, the same way, came in, picked things up. Cortland is such a positive role model and leader for these guys. Bailey. And I haven't even hit on all of these guys, just relative to our overall depth. We're going to add numbers to the position when you look at it, what we take to training camp. Now, whether that's through the draft or free agency. But I would say we're happy with the 2 we selected a year ago, the 1 we selected 2 years ago, and the guys that are already here. And now, if one of those players arrives in a round where we're looking at it, and that's the trick to this. I mean, you can target guys sometimes. We're all guilty of really liking a player and then but let's not bypass the crystal for a blender if we need a blender. And so I think you're still looking at value. It's the value need discussion, and I think that exists in every draft from today. And sometimes you can manipulate that yourself. Certainly in tiebreakers, it's important. But look, there's a number of good young receivers in this draft, and we'll see how that unfolds. But I do feel good about that group we have, and I think that they've shown obviously last season the jump we took offensively from where we were at to scoring offense and all of those other things, and obviously the addition of Bo. Those all contribute to that.
Coach and George, thank you so much for joining us today. That appears to be all the questions that we have in the queue.